Hey guys, Zom Fox here, and with just 5 days until the second season of the USFL kicks off, I've decided to go back and look at every single major change from year 1 to year 2 of the USFL. I think this is the best way to get a lot of people who haven't been keeping up to date or just new to the USFL to see what has changed. So without further ado, the single biggest change being the last team to be eliminated from making the playoffs in the Tampa Bay Bandits last year have become the Memphis Showboats. Now, the Memphis Showboats are officially back, and as for the Showboats, they are not bringing back the same color scheme, however. To go with what fans want, instead of bringing another team whose primary color is red, they've decided to swap to a dark blue and bright yellow color, which is something that everybody really does appreciate. And then, not only that, but there's another team who also changed their colors in the Pittsburgh Maulers. The Pittsburgh Maulers have become the only other team to change their color, as they have gone from the controversial purple and orange to the more Pittsburgh normal black and gold or black and yellow. This is definitely a change that a lot of people liked, and some people do not like because some people did love the other jerseys, but it was a pretty cool thing. But this isn't the only change happening for the Maulers and Showboats, as they're also going to different stadiums. We now have 4 separate hubs versus the one we had last year, as we have Ford Field for Detroit, Michigan, where the Michigan Panthers and Philadelphia Stars will be. Canton, Ohio's Tom Benson Hall of Fame Memorial Stadium will be where the Maulers and Generals play. Then we still have the same protective stadium for Birmingham, Alabama, with the Stallions and Breakers. And then in Memphis, Tennessee, we have Simons Bank Stadium, where the original Showboats played, and now the new Showboats as well as the Houston Gamblers are playing. These are all cool things, but these aren't just the only huge things happening, as each single one of these hubs had at least one coaching change. The first coaching change to talk about is Kirby Wilson of the Maulers. He stepped down as head coach and replaced Ray Horton. Ray Horton is the father to Ray Horton Jr., who was the DC of the Maulers last year and is now going to still be the DC as well as the assistant head coach. Ray Horton is a guy who's mainly been a DC for most of his entire career, mainly for the NFL naturally, and is definitely a solid upgrade hire. Then we have the next one being Jeff Fisher from the Michigan Panthers. He stepped down as well and in became former 49ers head coach and NFL DC Mike Nolan. Nolan was definitely another upgrade over Jeff Fisher. He has a lot of experience, especially a lot more recently than Fisher and Ray Horton has. Then the other head coach to talk about that left by stepping down was Larry Fedora. The only coach who made the playoffs to not be here this year was Fedora, and in replaced the man who was the quarterback's coach of the Super Bowl winning Eagles in John DeFilippo. A really solid coach who might be a lateral move to some, but some might see as an upgrade. Definitely someone who deserves a shot and is going to be a good one. And then we have the only head coach to actually prove that not only players but coaches can get another chances with this league, in Kevin Sumlin. Sumlin left to be basically the co-offensive coordinator, tight ends coach, and associate head coach at the University of Maryland, and in replaced Curtis Johnson, a man who has been a head coach at Tulane for a few years to mixed results, but has been mainly a wide receiver coach for most of his entire career. Overall, a very solid group of hires, with Curtis Johnson being the weakest one, but those aren't the only big names to really change. Why? Because we had Brian Woods, who was the president of the USFL last year, reportedly stepped down midway during the offseason, and we just found out news that Daryl Johnston, the man who was the vice president, is now become the new president. This is a move that a lot of fans, including myself, really did like. Daryl Johnston is a great face for the league and is definitely a really deserving figure to get that job, so it was definitely a really cool one to have it happen. And it was overall a great thing and a great change for the league. Then we have the schedule change. The schedule change is because of the fact that there are now going to be 29 games on broadcast, whereas last year there's only 23. Every single game will be on Saturday or Sunday, which is something that a lot of people did not like about having the USFL last year, was that some of the games are on non-Saturday and Sunday days, and so you don't know exactly what days there are games on. Is there one Thursday? Is there one Friday? Is there one Monday? Now every game will be on Saturday or Sunday. They're getting rid of the Peacock exclusive games. This was something that nobody liked. Having games exclusive to streaming is a big hit, as no matter what some people will tell you, streaming is still not the number one way to watch anything. If most people still have either cable or just broadcast. So getting rid of the Peacock exclusive games was great. And we only have one game that starts after 8 p.m. Last year, there was too many games that started way too late because the Eastern time zone people, where most of America is, wouldn't stay up to watch a game that started at 10 o'clock. So only having one game past 8 o'clock is a great start time. Overall, the schedule was a huge win for the league and was great. Then the league also had their first college draft. The way this draft works was based on player rights. Teams drafted players based on the ability to claim them if they come to the USFL. And while the idea is that players won't come for a couple years or a year, there have been one team that has actually gamed the system in the Pittsburgh Maulers. As I talked about in my draft review, they didn't seem to get anyone from big name universities. They got players who actually need a place to play because they probably won't go to the NFL, as we have already seen Traquan Dorsey and CJ Turner both not only come to the USFL but naturally go to the Maulers. And so we already have two players before the NFL drafts even happened that are already going to be playing for the Maulers, which is a huge win for the league. And then, of course, we have the players that have been lost. The players that have lost for different pastures, with the main ones being the NFL. That's the ultimate goal for these people, and Kevontae Turpin shows that goal more than anyone else, as he rebounded from being an MVP in the USFL to being a Pro Bowler in the NFL as a return specialist, who didn't do a ton on offense, but was a great returner and had an electric preseason game. Then we have Maurice Alexander Jr., who is now on the Detroit Lions, Tucker Addington, who made his shot from the Gamblers to go to the New England Patriots, and then Chris Odom, who despite tearing his ACL in the preseason last year, is still on the Browns, and so the Browns definitely do see something in him, as he was arguably the best player last year in the USFL as the DPOY. Then we have some other notable stars who left, with the biggest ones being QBs Kyle Sloter and Jordan Teamu. Then you have defensive players Davin Bellamy and DeMarcus Gates, tight end Sal Cannella, and wide receiver Victor Bolden. Naturally, there were a couple other guys that left, like Reggie Northrup or Donald Payne, as well as Luis Perez. But these are the main big guys that the league lost. And then in terms of ones gained, the league was able to show that there is talent that can be got to replace that is lost. A couple huge signing quarterbacks were McLeod Bethel Thompson from the CFL. He was a passing leader there for a couple years, as well as being a Grey Cup champion as a starter. We have former first-round projected quarterback Carson Strong, who due to knee injuries fell completely off draft boards and didn't get as good a shot in preseason camps as we thought he would. Then a couple former first-round pick defenders in Reuben Foster and Robert Kimdichie. And then we have another solid tight end in former third-round pick Jay Sternberger and former first-round pick receiver in Corey Coleman. There have been some other major signings as well. Akil Glass also went to the Breakers, who was an insanely great quarterback at HBCUs. Former second-round pick Breland Speaks. And then other players. It's just a really good amount of players that came to the league. And then we have the three biggest changes, I feel, in the rules, the lawsuit, and the CBA. So in terms of the rules, there are going to be three major rule changes. The first one to talk about is the kickoff change. So the way the USFL did kickoffs is they wanted to make it like legit kickoffs in the NFL, but ones that people actually would be able to return, as well as not providing a lot of injuries. The USFL shootout had a lot of success of players not getting injured in kickoffs, and there was an overall great amount of returns, as over 80% of kicks were returned. But rather than stay at 80, they want to get higher to about the 90% mark. So they're going to be moving back where the kicker kicks from the 25-yard line to the 20-yard line, which hopefully will provide an extra amount of kick returns while keeping the amount of injuries to a good low. Then another change is the touchback rule. The touchback rule at the end zone. It's a very controversial rule that some people like and a lot of people hate, where if an offense fumbles the ball out of the end zone where they're going to score a touchdown, it is automatically a touchback and the ball goes to the other team. Instead, now it'll go back to the spot of the fumble, so you can actually make for some lot cooler catches and touchdowns, as you can actually reach for it without risking losing the ball, which some people like and some people don't. But I think that overall it's a great change, and it's a good way to have the NFL see whether or not it works. And then, of course, the last rule is the running game clock. The USFL last year started with the basic normal rules, but then implemented the running clock on the first and third quarters, and are now going to do it in every single quarter, except for the last 5 minutes of the second and fourth quarter. This is to make sure the games only last at most 3 hours, so that people can actually watch the game in a quick time, which is something that a lot of people seem to want to do now. Overall, it was a really great change that they're doing that, and I think a lot of people are going to appreciate it. Overall, definitely something that a lot of people like, a great change. Then we have the USFL lawsuit. For those of you who don't know, the original people at the USFL, some of them decided to sue the new USFL/Fox for using the trademarks, but eventually this was completely settled, and now the USFL is allowed to use the OG stuff. In their commercial, No Substitutes, they famously use the 1984 USFL trading card set. They use a photo of Jim Kelly, Sports Illustrated magazine, and as well as the top left here, a little clip of Doug Flutie for the New Jersey Generals. Then Kevin Mack, a former running back for the LA Express and Cleveland Browns, was able to come to an event at the Tom Benson's Memorial Stadium at the Hall of Fame for the USFL a couple months ago, and was able to talk, USFL and talk his career and all that, and it was a really cool thing to be able to see them do that. So the ability for them to actually reference the OG league, as well as whenever the league does decide to expand, know that they can bring back some of those old teams, the Outlaws, the Renegades, the Federals, and all that without any real problems, is overall a great thing. And then the last major change is the CBA. The CBA was a huge deal. The USFL and United Steelworkers were able to make a legitimate CBA for the league and the players. They're going to be getting a 19% increase of weekly salaries. They're going to be getting $400 per week housing stipend, which they didn't have last year, as well as benefits up to $26,000 and things like training camp housing, education programs, and retirement funds, which overall provide a great environment for the players. In terms of the changes, a lot of changes were made from the first year to the second year, and I think that these last three are probably the biggest ones, aside from the Showboats change. But I think that overall, this is great for the league. Having a CBA, having the ability to use the OG trademarks and stuff like that without any problems is overall a great thing. I think the rule changes are a great sign. I think that everything that happened in this offseason was really good for the USFL. And now that we're just 5 days away, it's really cool. We're about to have the second season kick off. So if you enjoy content about the USFL, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell, as I'm going to have a lot more content naturally during the season. So, as always, have a great night.